Hey everyone, welcome to the Parts Management Podcast. I'm interviewing Chuck Hartley today, and we're talking about what parts managers need to know about inventory control. And we're going to go into metrics and just breaking down just the inventory and what you should be looking at as a parts manager. So, welcome, Chuck. Thanks for coming.
Hey, Kaylee.
So, metrics. I want to talk about for stock because it's something we talk about with our parts managers all the time. And it's a really important category of the inventory or metric of the inventory that needs to be tracked closely. And I think it's a category that most parts managers already look at, but PartsEdge defines it as for stock. So, do you want to just kind of go into the details? What is for stock, and why are we calling it for stock? I guess is the question.
Okay, for stock, first off, these are parts that are on the dealer shelves that have never qualified for an ASR, that never met a phase-in criteria on the system. This is basically another word for stock that I've been using a lot lately because maybe it makes a little bit more sense to everybody out there. Unfulfilled demand. Let's face it, the part got ordered, and now, for whatever reason, the sale didn't get fulfilled. And we did a study on this, almost 20 years ago now. It's amazing. They wanted to know, I kept using this term for stock, and I've been using it for 35 years. And they go, tell us what it is. Where does it come from? And after doing this study, and it still hasn't changed even to this day, except one thing has been added, which I'll point out here in a minute. We did a study, and number one was over-ordering by technicians to solve a customer's problem. They order a sensor, a module, a harness. The parts come in, the sensor fixes it, they hand the module and the harness back to the parts department. Unbeknownst to those technicians, that literally almost becomes idle inventory right away.
Wait, pause. I think that anyone that's listening that's a parts person right now is saying, yeah, see, I told you the technicians are over ordering. So how do we what would be your suggestion on like helping with that area of number one? And then we'll get to the rest.
Okay, well, there's two consequences to that. Number
Okay.
one, now the parts department is stuck with a couple of parts that, are almost instant idle inventory. Okay. That starts to clutter up the parts department. They have to carry these parts, put them on the shelf that takes valuable space up, that now the technicians, they complain that the parts department never has all the right parts. I don't care if you got $5 million or 500,000, every technician complains. They want you to be the depot, and hey, you know what? You need technicians to sell parts, and technicians need parts to sell labor. They're hooked together. You can't separate the two, okay? And so educating the service department, it could be that maybe they don't have enough tools, to diagnose it better. I found that out myself personally as a fixed ops director, that we didn't have enough DRD3 testers. And so, the technicians, the good news is they took care of the customer. The bad news is created a lot of idle stock, or what we call forced inventory, okay? And so with that being said, rah, yay, it's a fixed operations issue, not just a parts issue. And that was number one. Number two, and this could be number one if you're a very large wholesaler, is returns from body shops. That's the big one. Most garages and so forth don't return a lot, but body shops, oh my gosh, it's almost, a disease. And it was estimated, and I think it was like 2008, NADA or somebody came out and estimated that the average body shop returns 15% of the parts that they buy from a dealer. And this day and age, it seems like it's probably with aftermarket sheet metal and whatnot, things like that, it seems like it would probably be a little higher. And some of these high volume body shops, they demand massive discounts and unlimited returns if you want their business. And so that's number two, okay? Number three, and just about everybody can look at this, and this, again, is more of an organizational process within the dealership, is customers not returning for repairs, especially under warranty. You can't get them to prepay the parts because it's under warranty, and it ends up being non-critical. I love to use there's a nick in the door trim panel. You order that in for the customer. It's a $600 door trim panel, and the customer goes, I don't want to be inconvenienced. I can't find time, and they just don't come back and get it. And anybody listening to this knows it happens all the time. Part of this that you throw into it are special orders. How many special orders do you have sitting on the shelf waiting? And a lot of times getting to that number 3 process, it's a matter of education and process. So many times I talk with dealerships, who's responsible to call the customer and get a repair, get them back in? Oh, the service advisor. That's the worst thing you can do. Service advisors typically are worried about what's in front of them, communicating with customers, getting cars through the shop. They're I got to fix what I got in front of me now. Trying to carve out time to call their customers to set up appointments. That's where a lot of times, and I did this before BDCs, is I took the appointment process completely away from the service advisors and handed it off to a couple of people in the service department. And, we were able to get people back in, get them rescheduled and whatnot. So, that whole process right there, again, parts service related, but making sure that you communicate with the customers to get them back in to get those repairs done. That's number 3. Number 4 now, and this got thrown up, is ASRs. ASRs, the one-hit wonders, okay? You have to take a percentage of those, and what we've seen is around 40% of the parts that are approved end up going to where the good news is they're guaranteed. The bad news is at a certain period of time, depending on the manufacturer, they take it back. But it sat on your shelf and took up valuable space on some of these marginal parts.
Yep.
So that brings us to, as this, and I love talking about this story because it really hits home. You can say treating parts like used cars, your first loss is your best loss. When it comes to idle inventory, or what I'm talking about for stock, is I had a gentleman by the name of Art Neiman. He was a HR guy, just a wonderful guy. And he got up once and did a whole speech about when's the right time to fire an employee. And I thought, wow, this will get my attention. And he says, before you hire them. And I went, well, from a parts perspective, look at it that way as well. Only order what you need, and of course you're still going to have all the mitigating circumstances. Some customers won't come back or whatnot, making sure the right tools are there. But if you control what's being ordered, making sure that, all the processes have been followed, you're going to minimize your idle capital. And so what we see is all of this, and I bring this up to parts managers all the time. I said, okay, you got a set of floor mats. They come in, they're the wrong color, or the customer doesn't come back. Pick whatever reason, and now you're forced to put these floor mats on your shelf. I said, when does it become idle capital, idle inventory? And the answer is simple. The minute you put it on the shelf, it never qualified for anything. It never fulfilled its sale. It's idle inventory the instant it gets on that shelf. And so Mike Nichols came up with this. I love giving him the credit because it boggled my mind. He came up with this technical obsolescence. And I go, technical obsolescence? Yeah, 7 to 12 months in age. So we sat and really reviewed and analyzed what the heck is he talking about, this 7 to 12 months, and he calls it technical obsolescence. Well, what we discovered is that if a part hits a 7th month and it hasn't sold, its chances of getting to obsolescence in 13 months is 85%. Your chances of reselling it is 15%. And as it ages through this 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, the percentage drops. And finally, over 12 months, your chances of selling it literally drop to less than 3%. Okay? So technically, and that's why we measure it with our clients, the 7 to 12, what we do is we take it And this is just a great way to sit and come up with a forecast on what you need and what's coming at you in idle inventory. Throw out the ASR, technical obsolescence. I'm talking about unfulfilled demand that's not guaranteed. You take that 7 to 12 and you divide it by 6 because you got 6 months, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, right? So you divide that and come up with a monthly average. And that's basically what you're going to need to make sure your obsolete inventory doesn't grow by managing it in the technical end instead of once it finally gets to obsolete. And we put a huge focus on that because if it hits that 7th month, man, you really need to start working on a game plan to make sure that it doesn't hit the 13th month.
And these are just,
Let me come up
yeah.
for air. Okay.
Thank God, Chuck. Man, I thought you weren't going to stop. No, that was all good because I just wanted you had to lay it all out there. With the technical obsolescence or just talking about these categories, I just want to highlight how important it is to look at this data and give this information to parts managers so that they can effectively control their inventory. And that's kind of what we're talking about is it's really about data, reviewing, understanding what you're looking at. And I want to also point out or ask you about the importance of, from what I understand, looking at your obsolescence or true obsolescence, 13 months no sale and 13 months no receipt. And from my understanding is that the DMS providers do have this information, but you do have to go in separate areas to look at it. Can you just kind of define or explain why it's important to look at your 13 months no sale and 13 months of receipt? I feel like most people know, but let's consider like maybe a new parts manager listening and not knowing what that means.
Okay, simple example. Again, using floor mats, since I've highlighted floor mats. You've had a floor mat that you had some sort of demand or addition to your system 10 months ago. And all of a sudden, it's sitting on the system, non-stock, waiting for demand. All of a sudden, you get a call for this part. The counter person, they order the floor mats. It comes in, and again, for whatever reason, wrong color, customer doesn't show back up, you put it on the shelf. You didn't fulfill the sale. Now, the months no sale is at 10 months because it hasn't sold in 10 months. Months no receipt, and this is the critical part, months no receipt is the last time you paid for the part from whoever, the manufacturer or whatever. So on these DMS systems, it says, oh, this is 10 months no sale, but it's 0 months no receipt because you just bought it 2 weeks ago. Now let's fast forward 3 months from now. Now on the system, all of a sudden, this is obsolescence. It's at 13 months based on months no sale, but in reality, you just wrote the check 3 months ago. The months no receipt is 3. So I always say if you only got one way to look at your inventory, look at it by receipts because that's what matters to the dealer. The last time you bought the part, not the last time you sold it, because 10 to 15% of your months no sale are going to meet that criteria that they were just sitting there waiting for demand on your DMS. Now you order it and pay for it. And so months no receipt, if left to my own device, is the way I'd measure it. But when you use the two to intersect, 13 months no sale and 13 months no receipt, and work your way backwards, 12 months no sale, 12 months no receipt, 11. Now you're always going to get your oldest inventory or review your oldest inventory before you're looking at some of these marginal parts. And that's why it's so critical that you look at that. Me being a geek and looking at obsolescence, I've gone out and Googled it and looked at other retail industries, and literally most industries manage it by the last receipt date. And our manufacturers do that. I can't tell you how many times I've had a GM client call up and say, this part's at 23 months no sale and it's rim protected and they're not taking it back. And we look it up and go, oh, wait, it's 13 months since you bought it. GM is looking at the receipt date that they sold it to you, not the sale date you have on your DMS.
I thank you for defining that because I think that's really important too. understand. And I feel like we covered a lot with forced stock, technical obsolescence, true obsolescence. And, those are the important things to look at when you're looking at inventory control. Is there anything you want to add that I didn't ask you about?
Well, and this is something, we've covered before, but it's worth mentioning. And we talked about this in sources as well, but, you really are dealing, especially if you're on an ASR program, you really are dealing with two different inventories, what's guaranteed and what's not guaranteed. And that's why breaking out what's guaranteed from what's not guaranteed by source and reporting mechanisms is really critical, to understanding your inventory and the health of your inventory.
That's a great point because I know that's something I mention a lot when I'm presenting PartsEdge is the importance of breaking out the inventories and how you can make more accurate, proactive decisions, right? That's a better word, proactive decisions on what you should actually be stocking for your true demand. Because I
Right.
think that's what everyone's trying to accomplish is what is your true market demand? What should you be stocking to fulfill your customers?
Exactly. You bet.
Well, thank you, Chuck.